Developing right now on Morning News Now, disruption and discipline at Columbia University. Chaos overnight as pro-Palestinian protesters storm and occupy a school building just hours after university officials began to suspend students who failed to leave an on-campus encampment.
The university has conducted itself with obstinacy and arrogance. Where we asked for amnesty, they gave us more discipline.
All this as the protests grow at colleges from coast to coast. Plus, Secretary of State Antony Blinken in the Middle East amid signs of progress toward a possible ceasefire. We'll have the latest. Tragedy in Charlotte. It's being called one of the deadliest attacks on law enforcement in years. This morning, a community and the country grieving the deaths of 4 officers shot and killed while serving an arrest warrant at a home. But we're learning about what happened. Also this morning, bracing for the worst, millions of people facing the threat of heavy rain, damaging hail, even tornadoes, just days after severe weather ripped through several states. We're tracking the conditions and the areas that could get hit the hardest. And little words, big business. She's living proof that a little positivity goes a long way. In our latest edition of Women Mean Business, I'll introduce you to the founder of a jewelry company whose wearable affirmations have gotten a lot of high-profile attention.
Looking forward to that conversation. Good to have you with us on this Tuesday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We begin this morning with those escalating tensions between Columbia University administrators and pro-Palestinian demonstrators on campus.
Overnight, students were seen smashing windows and occupying an academic building on campus. It comes just hours after the university began suspending students for failing to vacate the encampment yesterday. Administrators have yet to say how many students have been suspended. NBC News correspondent Bree Jackson joins us from Washington with the latest on these protests all across the country. Bree, good morning.
Good morning, Joe, Savannah. So in an email this morning, Columbia University is urging its students to avoid coming to the main campus there, saying the safety of every single member of its community is paramount. Now, this as protests at colleges and universities continue to grow, even as more schools threaten academic consequences. A dramatic escalation overnight at Columbia University, where protesters entered a building on campus. Some demonstrators were seen breaking windows as others attempted to barricade themselves inside. Students are taking a stand at colleges and universities nationwide. They're calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and for schools to cut financial ties with Israel.
We demand divestment. We will not be moved unless by force.
On some campuses, police have arrested dozens of demonstrators. At Columbia University, which has become the epicenter of the movement, school officials have turned to suspending students.
So many of the students feel like our voices weren't being heard. We'd have protests, we'd have marches, we'd have petitions.
The growing calls for action come as $9 billion in aid makes its way to Gaza as part of the $95 billion package Congress passed last week. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East, pressing for Israel to do more to protect civilians and for Hamas to release hostages.
Hamas has before it a proposal that is extraordinarily generous on the part of Israel. And in this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas.
As ceasefire talks continue, so do protests. And here on Capitol Hill, later today, House Speaker Mike Johnson is set to make an announcement cracking down on what he says is anti-Semitism spreading through college campuses. His office also says there's going to be a new effort that would include wide-ranging investigations focused on holding administrators accountable for failing to keep students safe. Back to you.
All right, Bree Jackson. Bree, thank you.
Well, this morning, Hamas officials are considering the latest ceasefire hostage proposal, as you heard, after talks with mediators ended in Egypt late last night. NBC News has learned that Israel is waiting for Hamas's response before sending its own team of negotiators to Cairo.
The talks come as Secretary Blinken continues his own diplomatic push for a ceasefire in Gaza while touring the Middle East. Secretary Blinken is meeting with the King of Jordan this morning before heading to Israel later tonight. Efforts to reach a truce are growing more urgent. Health officials in Gaza say at least 40 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes yesterday. The enclave remains on the brink of famine as Israel prepares for a full-scale assault on Rafah.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now. Monica, good morning. So yesterday, President Biden spoke with the leaders of Qatar and Egypt who are mediating these talks. What was his message to them? Does he believe there is room for optimism on a deal here?
Well, that is certainly the hope in the Biden administration this morning, and they are pushing on all fronts, diplomatic and, of course, political. And we know that with Secretary Blinken there, they're trying to use all of that kind of power to see if it's possible to get to a deal. But the president specifically in his phone calls yesterday with those key leaders in the region and in these talks really did ask them to exert every single effort possible to get to a deal that would result in a 6-week pause in the fighting in exchange for the release of at least an initial wave of hostages and then potentially a second one, depending on what the terms are. But really, we've been in this place so many times, Savannah and Joe, in the last couple of weeks and months where it seems like a deal could be on the brink. But the final details, the final pieces of this puzzle that need to come together are so delicate and so specific. And that is often the most difficult part. So many are viewing this as a sort of now or never week. It's really critical because there's the potential looming invasion of Rafah, which Israel is pledging to do now with or without a hostage deal that is adding to the timing of all of this. So the president really trying to use every lever he has available to try to see if this can get done.
So, Monica, Secretary Blinken in Jordan today before heading to Israel later. Right now, what do we expect his message to Israeli officials to be?
And you saw a little bit of a preview there where he did call this deal extremely generous. And he really did say that the only thing stopping this deal currently is Hamas, because Israel has made certain concessions, things that they had asked for in original rounds, they've now compromised on. And so the U.S. is effectively saying this is the best deal you're going to get. And the moment to do it is now, because the need for the humanitarian aid that needs to get into Gaza is simply getting worse by the day. And so they're continuing to appeal, of course, to the countries that are involved in these talks on that front as well, saying, of course, any kind of a temporary ceasefire would allow for so much more aid to get in through countries who have been helping, like Jordan, and that's part of the conversation today.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much.
Let's talk more about this with Gershon Baskin. He is the Middle East director at the International Communities Organization and has taken part in hostage negotiations between Israel and Hamas. We appreciate having you on this morning. So the U.S. is putting pressure on Hamas to try and accept this latest ceasefire hostage proposal. But here's the big question. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, would he accept it? You've got right-wing hardliners in his governments who are against the deal. They're threatening to quit if he agrees to a truce. So do you think Netanyahu would risk the collapse of his government for the sake of this hostage deal?
That is the million-dollar question, no doubt about it. But the Israelis have given a positive answer to Egypt and to the Americans on the offer that's on the table. It's important to note that there has been extreme pressure on Netanyahu from the United States and from Egypt not to lead into the incursion into Rafah and to accept a deal that would bring at least some of the hostages home. The head of Egyptian Central Intelligence was here in Israel for 3 days with his team. They stayed overnight here for 3 days. This is unprecedented. And now everyone is applying the same pressure on Hamas to say yes to the deal, and we're waiting for their answer. If there is a yes, both sides have made significant compromises on things that were just a week ago non-starters. For Israel, having to compromise on allowing the free movement of displaced Palestinians from the south of the Gaza Strip to the north of the Gaza Strip, and Hamas making compromises on their demands that this be the final end to the war, including an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. We're shooting for a break now, a 6-week ceasefire that the Egyptians believe will be long enough to extend the negotiations and perhaps lead to a permanent end to the war.
So we actually just heard from Netanyahu this morning that Israel will enter Rafah with or without a ceasefire hostage deal as these negotiations are ongoing. Do you think that harms chances for a truce? And do you think the Biden administration could do more to pressure Israel against conducting that operation?
I think there's extreme pressure on Israel not to do it, both from the United States and other allies and from Egypt and the Saudis and others. But a threat isn't worth anything if you don't intend to use it. So the threat is on the table, and it is aimed to threaten Hamas that this is what Israel will do. Obviously, if there is a deal, if Hamas agrees and the Israeli team goes to Cairo and they negotiate the details and the logistics of the first part of the deal, then the Rafah incursion will be put aside. It won't be completely removed from the table unless all the hostages are returned, 133 of them. We don't know how many of them are alive and how many of them are not. But that is ultimately what Israel needs to have happen, is to get all the hostages out of Gaza.
Gershon, in the last few weeks, we've seen several proof-of-life videos that appear to show Hamas hostages. As someone who's been involved with this before, is this a signal that Hamas is looking to make a deal?
It seems to be, yes. They are using it to put pressure on Israeli society, on the families of the hostages, who after each one of these videos have appeared have raised up their level of activism on the streets, protesting in front of the Prime Minister's home and office, in front of the Ministry of Defense. Whenever the cabinet is meeting, they are there, and these protests are getting bigger and louder. They are effective. Of course, there are so many of the hostages that we don't know what their fate is, but everyone that we do see is alive, even if they look really bad and they're under duress and they're certainly not being taken care of. It is a sign of life and is important to the families to see this. So they are very valuable. They're very important, I think, to both sides.
All right, Gershon Baskin, as always, we appreciate you sharing your experience with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, a new week of testimony in former President Trump's hush money trial is set to resume today here in New York.
Last week, the jury heard from former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. The focus of his testimony was the so-called catch and kill arrangement to suppress negative stories about Mr. Trump, especially about his alleged affairs. This morning, Mr. Trump will be back in a lower Manhattan courtroom where testimony will continue from the banker for his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who will get into the financial details of the case.
For more, we are joined by NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. He is downtown outside the courthouse, and we have NBC News legal analyst Danny Sabella's here in studio with us. Good morning to both of you. So, Vaughn, I'll start with you. And what Joe just mentioned, we've been hearing from this banker who worked with Michael Cohen. His testimony is set to resume today. Tell us who he is and how he figures into the prosecution's case.
Right. Gary Farrow is part of the bigger story, connecting all of these pieces together, right from the beginning of the masterminding of the alleged scheme between Michael Cohen, Donald Trump, and David Pecker at the National Enquirer to buy up these negative stories, these alleged affairs that Donald Trump had from the likes of Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, to the actual execution of it. And that's where Gary Farrow, who is a former banker for First Republic, comes into the picture. And on Friday afternoon, just before they let out for the weekend, he began testifying about setting up two different bank accounts for Michael Cohen, that they had a very close relationship where Michael Cohen would either come in or place a phone call. And in October, back when the Stormy Daniels arrangement was coming to fruition, he testified that Michael Cohen came in and set up two different accounts. And at one point, there is also documented evidence that is being presented to this jury that pertains to these accounts. And there was one email that was entered into the record in which Farrow sent to a member of his team, quote, "Need an account open for Mike Cohen immediately. He wants no address on the checks. Calling you now to discuss." It showed the urgency to which they were setting up this account. We expect him to come back this morning to begin taking the stand again before he faces cross-examination from the defense.
Yvonne, after Farrow, the next marquee witnesses, some big names: Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, Hope Hicks. Do we know when we're going to hear from those people?
No, not at this point in time. At this point, the District Attorney's Office has been giving the defense team for Donald Trump a heads up about who the singular next witnesses that could come forward. But they usually are not giving that until hours before, if not a day before. So at this point in time, it's up in the air. We could see potentially Stormy Daniels next, or Karen McDougal, or former Trump aide Hope Hicks. Again, we're looking at this trial lasting anywhere from, 4 to 6 more weeks here. So there's still plenty of time for those witnesses to come forward.
Danny, let's bring you in here. So one of those marquee witnesses, as Joe just mentioned, Michael Cohen, but we do know there are some credibility issues here, right? I mean, he was convicted for lying to Congress as well as tax fraud. Walk us through how he plays into the prosecution's case and if that's an issue at all.
Yeah, Michael Cohen's credibility issues may end up being not as big a deal as everyone is making them out to be, because as long as the people, the state of New York, as long as they establish all the different documents, you have a witness like David Pecker who lines up testimony with what Michael Cohen is going to testify about. I mean, don't get me wrong. Michael Cohen does have credibility issues. And in addition to credibility issues, he has motive issues. That's going to be explored as well. He has a motive to get Donald Trump. And you better believe the defense is going to hit him hard on that issue, that this is some kind of revenge plot. I believe that was the title of one of his books, I think. So this is something that Michael Cohen, he's mostly going to be authenticating documents, laying foundations. And yes, the defense can potshot at him about his credibility. But if the people do this right, it won't make that much of a difference. And they've already gotten out in front of it on their end, saying, yeah, we know our guy has credibility issues. That's the way to handle it.
Let's talk about the gag order. We have another hearing on this set for this week. We had the one last week, and we still don't really have a decision from the judge on that. Why is that?
Look, gag orders are pretty rare to begin with, but rolling gag orders where you're like, it seems like we're going to be in a situation where it's like, okay, let's just do every Tuesday for the gag order or the every Thursday. And now we have a second hearing and we don't even know the result of the first hearing. It's an interesting position because at least as to his first decision, Justice Merchan's going to have to draw some lines and decide what is violative and what is not. And then that, of course, will govern the future gag order violation hearings. And I suspect we're going to have more than just the one that is currently scheduled. This seems to be something that's going to be happening every week.
Danny Ceballos, Fawn Hilliard, thank you both very much for being with us.
The city of Charlotte is grieving this morning after 4 law enforcement officers were killed in the line of duty while serving a warrant yesterday.
It is one of the deadliest attacks on law enforcement in recent years. We've learned the warrant was for possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Chief Johnny Jennings says a U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force approached the suspect, and the suspect opened fire on them with a high-powered rifle. The task force returned fire, and the suspect was killed. But then they were met with additional gunfire that came from inside the house. 2 people inside the house were detained as persons of interest. 4 other officers were injured. Jennings is calling it a tragic day for the city.
Today's an absolute tragic day for the city of Charlotte and for the profession of law enforcement. Today we lost some heroes that are out to just simply trying to keep our community safe.
NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian joins us now. So, Ken, where does the investigation stand this morning? Have investigators released any new information about the suspect?
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. They have not officially named the suspect, although there are reports out there naming him, and they have said that he had a lengthy criminal history. Felon in possession of a firearm is a serious charge, but it's not murder, for example, but it just underscores that law enforcement officers never know what they're going into when they go to serve a warrant. It's such a dangerous thing, and it has resulted so often in tragedy, guys.
What are we learning about the officers who were killed?
Yeah, again, those names are starting to trickle out. We know that one local police officer who died after being treated in the hospital was the father of a 3-year-old and left a wife and child. Others have not yet been identified. So we know that there was 1 U.S. Marshal who was killed, and then 2 members of the Marshals Task Force who turned out to be state correctional officers, and then that 4th local Charlotte-Mecklenburg police officer.
Ken, put this in perspective for us, not just how big of a loss this is for that community, but really for law enforcement officers nationwide.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. It's viewed as a national tragedy. There were, until this point, 51 officers killed nationally in the line of duty. So Attorney General Merrick Garland issued a statement. President Biden issued a statement noting that these are officers who rushed into harm's way and who made the ultimate sacrifice. Every police officer, every law enforcement officer and their families are thinking about those men today.
All right. Ken Delaney and Ken, thank you so much.
Now let's get to the severe weather causing widespread damage to the middle of the country. People are picking up the pieces this morning after a massive tornado ravaged parts of Oklahoma. There's a further risk of more severe storms today for parts of the Midwest. Meteorologist Angie Lassman will have more on today's forecast in just a moment. But first, NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the latest from Oklahoma.
Hey guys, good morning. We're getting a closer look at even more devastation here in Sulphur, Oklahoma. Take a look at this truck. The windshield blasted in. You've got debris hanging off the side of it, and just look at this truck. It's just mangled metal now, and over here we've got piles of bricks. I'm trying to be careful where I step because we've got bricks on the ground, we've got wood, we've got shards of glass, shattered glass all over the place, and just look at what's left of this structure. Just the mangled metal, the cables, the wooden beams, and again, just all of these bricks scattered around here. We're getting some more information about at least one of the people who lost their life here in Sulphur. The fire chief yesterday saying that he knew the individual who died here in this small city. He referred to her as a hometown girl. We're also learning more about the storms that have happened across this region. The National Weather Service has now said that one of the tornadoes in Oklahoma, not the one here, but one of the other tornadoes in Oklahoma, is now an EF4, so even stronger than previously thought, with winds gusting up to 170 miles per hour. And again, we're just looking at the aftermath of these storms, and there is the potential for more tough weather in this community in the days ahead, guys. Back to you.
All right, Jesse Kirsch, thank you so much.
Yeah, and as Jesse mentioned, another round of severe weather could be in store for millions of Americans.
Yeah, Andrew Lastman is with us to track the severe weather for us. Hey, Andrew, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. A busy couple of days for us as we gear up for, yes, exactly what you just said, more severe weather. We've also got a line of some showers and thunderstorms that's working its way to the east, stretching from the Great Lakes down to parts of the Tennessee Valley. This is eventually going to work into parts of the East Coast and leave folks with little rain to contend with today. But we've got to also see the potential for some flash flooding, specifically across parts of the Adirondacks in the interior Northeast. Moving a little farther to the west, though, across the midsection of the country, spots that you just heard Jesse talking about, that's where we're going to see the potential for some of these stronger storms again today. This highest risk is going to stretch from Iowa down into portions of Kansas and Oklahoma. You can see there is an enhanced risk centered right over Kansas City to Des Moines. We're looking at all hazards, 8 million people included in this. So the hail, the strong straight line, the strong wind gusts, we could see straight line winds potentially here as we get through the afternoon hours, and a couple of tornadoes. But this is the area that we're watching for the largest of that hail. We're talking 2 inches or larger. So something to watch here as we get into the afternoon and evening hours tonight. And then we see our next system emerge out of the Rockies. This one's going to bring us one more round of some of these stronger storms, and again, centered across the middle of the country. This is likely to intensify here as we get into the later afternoon hours of your day tomorrow. But it does encompass 3 million people, a good chunk of the middle of the country, and once again, some of those same areas that were under that severe weather potential last week and saw some devastating conditions, and then are under that severe weather potential today and even into tomorrow. You can see Concordia, Wichita, Kansas City, stretching down to Midland, all included in that, with the chance to see some large hail, some of those strong wind gusts up to 75 miles per hour, and even a couple of those strong tornadoes. That's tomorrow. And on top of that, we've got some heavy rain that we're going to watch as well. Those hourly rainfall rates will likely be quite impressive, 1 to maybe 2 inches of rain per hour. Omaha, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and stretching as far south as Austin, all included in that slight risk of some flash flooding as we gear up for a couple of inches of rain. We could see 1 to 2 inches for the more widespread areas, but upwards of 3 and even as high as 5 inches of rain is possible for those localized amounts. So on top of the potential to see the strong storms that bring all of those same hazards, the hail, the winds, and the tornadoes, we've also got the chance to see some of the flooding concerns. Only a few flood alerts are up right now, but we'll likely see that start to advance and start to expand here as we get into your day tomorrow with all of that rain working through. As we look ahead to the end of the work week, we've got nice conditions along the East Coast, but that same system will march its way a little farther to the east, and that flood risk is going to be centered across parts of the south. So the southeast stretching up into parts of the Great Lakes. That's where we'll see some of that rain. We could even pick up a little bit of snow across parts of the northern Rockies. We'll see plenty of sunshine for our friends as we round out the work week on the West Coast. And then we gear up for some more rain. West Coast and the East Coast and even the middle of the country looks a little unsettled for us here for Saturday. That storm risk will be something we'll keep an eye on for parts of the southern plains. plenty of heat to contend with across the desert. And as we finish up our weekend, we're looking mild but wet for the East Coast. We'll still be dealing with some of those showers and thunderstorms that we'll have to watch across parts of the plains, and that stretches all the way up into the Northeast. If you're looking for a little bit of sunshine, the Great Lakes, the Midwest, the northern plains, that's where we'll see nicer conditions. Temperature-wise, will be quite warm along the Gulf Coast with highs into those mid to even upper 80s. We could see a couple of 90s across the Sunshine State. Plenty of warmth for folks across the desert Southwest, too. And you guessed it, a little bit more of that snow and rain that we'll have to contend with across parts of the Cascades, the Rockies. Out west, we'll see that. So some unsettled conditions, guys, over the next couple of days. But specifically today and tomorrow is our greatest risk for some of those strong storms. The severe storms that we saw were so damaging across much of that same region Friday and Saturday. So we'll be watching closely those same areas today.
All right. Thank you so much, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thank you. There is much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, the upside of downsizing. New research showing the benefits of having less stuff, why it could be key to improving your well-being.
Up first after the break, royal return. King Charles resuming his public duties amid his cancer battle. We're going to take you to London for the latest on his recovery. Stay with us. Welcome back. Britain's King Charles is resuming his royal duties today after he was diagnosed and started treatment for an unspecified form of cancer back in February.
Yeah, here's the king this morning, accompanied by Queen Camilla as they visit a cancer center in London to meet with medical specialists and patients. In a statement from Buckingham Palace, the king's medical team says they're, quote, very encouraged by his recovery so far.
Joining us now is NBC royal commentator and Talk TV presenter Daisy McAndrew. Daisy, always good to have you with us. So Buckingham Palace said the king's treatment program will continue, but after making that first public appearance during Easter, tell us what this means for the king now to be returning to the public eye.
This really is deeply significant. And I think if you look at King Charles's face on that visit, and some other pictures have just been released from inside the hospital, the cancer ward where he was meeting people, men and women undergoing chemotherapy, I think he looked absolutely thrilled to be out and about again. We know he's a workaholic. We know he will have been champing at the bit and begging his doctors to let him out. But I think he also looked really quite emotional. There was a very nice reaction towards him, and he knows that the public really are willing him on and have much more than I think ever before in his life been sending him a lot of genuine good wishes and love and affection. And I think he's a very sentimental man. That's one of the things people don't really understand about him. And I think he is really appreciating that outpouring.
Buckingham Palace didn't reveal any further details on the king's treatment or how it will continue, but they do say this is just the start of a number of public engagements. Tell us what we do know about what's coming in the next few weeks.
Yeah. So as you said, we do know that he is continuing to undergo cancer treatment. I believe that he's having weekly treatment, mostly at home. You know, the medics are coming to him rather than him going to the medics. I think that's understandable. This, as you said, was the first public event when he was indoors with people, because, of course, we know that anybody that's might be immunosuppressant, that there is a danger to pick up other bugs and so on. So the doctors are trying to reduce that. We've got garden parties coming up at Buckingham Palace over the summer. We've got Ascot, horse racing, which is Royal Ascot, and always you'd expect to see the monarch there. We know that the Japanese Emperor and Empress are due to come over in June, and that the King is very much hoping that he will be able to host them. So I think we expect to see more of him, but it will be on a week-by-week basis whereby the doctors will say yes or no to him.
As we know, of course, the Princess of Wales, Kate Middleton, is also dealing with a cancer diagnosis. I recognize it's always hard to ask questions about her because they're understandably so private about this. But what could this mean for what we see from Kate going forward? Do you think we're going to learn anything new about either of their diagnoses and what's happening with their treatment anytime soon?
I personally don't think we're going to know what specific cancer either or both of them are suffering with until they're given the all clear. I think that will be the moment where they will say, this is now behind me. You know, that's what we all hope will happen sooner rather than later. And this was what I was undergoing. But of course, the situations are very different, even though they look like, one's a future queen, one's a current king. Actually, that is different. One is head of state. One has, I'm not being unkind, he's a man in his 70s. His reign is going to be a lot shorter, certainly, than his mother's, and shorter than most of his predecessors. So this is a man in a hurry. He doesn't want to be confined to quarters. He wants to be out and about. And I think by him choosing to go to a cancer centre today, he wasn't retreating from his cancer. He was almost leaning into his cancer. He was trying to say to people, yes, I have cancer, so do millions of you. We'll get through this together. And I think that is a very modern approach, that we have never, ever been told that a previous monarch has cancer, even though retrospectively we found out his grandfather had cancer. His grandfather didn't even know he had cancer, but his doctors did. We believe that the Queen was suffering with bone cancer, but that has never been confirmed. The Queen Mother, we now know, had cancer twice. But again, that was never revealed at the time. So this is, although it might seem not such a big deal to tell people you've got cancer, because of course a president would have to, this is a big deal for a king. Whereas Kate has very young children, we know that that was one of the main reasons why William and Kate didn't want to reveal her cancer, and she wants to keep it private.
All right. Daisy McAndrew, thanks so much for your time this morning. We always appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Tropical vacation, now a nightmare for one American family.
Critical day for all of us. My fate is likely the fate of others as well.
When we come back, more on the tough law that landed a tourist behind bars over what he calls an accident that could happen to almost anyone.
And we are in our sad but productive era. Why a specific lyric from Taylor Swift's new album is striking a chord with so many people. Get ready for it. Our weekly mental health check-in is next on Morning News Now.
We're back now with the story of how a law meant to crack down on crime in a Caribbean paradise is now leading to the arrest of unwitting American vacationers. Turks and Caicos enacted a tough law against bringing ammunition onto the islands. And as NBC News correspondent Sam Brock reports, many of the accused say it was all an accident.
On the islands of Turks and Caicos, the number of Americans detained for possession of ammunition continues to climb.
I'm not going to be able to talk to you in prison. I love you. Goodbye.
Jerry Ann Wenrick's husband, Tyler, has been behind bars for more than a week after authorities uncovered 2 rounds of ammunition in the paramedics' luggage as he tried to leave the island.
It was an accident. Like, our airport didn't catch it and the cruise ship didn't catch it.
Turks and Caicos confirming they're prosecuting 4 men for violating a recent law meant to crack down on gun violence that carries a 12-year mandatory minimum sentence. That includes Michael Lee Evans, a 72-year-old retired Texas teacher, and Ryan Watson, a father of 2 who was traveling with his wife.
I never recall putting that ammunition in that bag, but somehow they ended up in there.
Like, take me to this roller coaster.
The thought of our kids not having either one of us for potentially 12 years was very scary and heart-wrenching.
Valerie Watson has since been released, and the couple says they carried the bag on the plane, but TSA missed the ammunition. TSA telling NBC News it's working on an algorithm to more effectively and efficiently detect such items, but an oversight occurred that the agency is addressing internally. The other suspects appear to have checked their bags, like Brian Hagerich, whose trial starts Friday.
Probably the most critical day for all of us. My fate is likely the fate of others as well.
While that remains up in the air, the U.S. government continues to warn travelers to check their bags. Sam Brock, NBC News.
Well, it is time now for our weekly mental health check-in, and we are kicking things off with some new research that breaks down the very real benefits of exercise for kids.
Plus, a song lyric from Taylor Swift's new album striking a chord with Gen Z and millennial women who are feeling the pressure to do it all.
We, as you can see, have got our friend Dr. George James here. He's a psychologist and licensed marriage and family therapist. Thanks for being with us, as always, Dr. James. Good morning. So let's jump right in. We've talked, of course, a lot about the impact exercise has on adults, how that can make you healthier, but not so much about kids. But we do have a new study. This was conducted by researchers out of Taiwan. It found that physical fitness can protect kids specifically against anxiety, depression, and attention difficulties. Maybe that's not a surprise, but maybe it's tougher. We've seen a lot of screen time increasing. So what can families do to get their kids moving in this digital age?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah and Joy. Of course, this study just makes sense as we have talked about it for adults, and we know that that's one of the treatment recommendations that I share often, is that increased physical activity can make us feel better. And I would imagine that it increases a level of confidence for our young folks as well, just knowing that they're able to do things. And so sometimes we just might have to go and do it with them, go outside and be active with them, or maybe involve them in certain sports, or maybe with their school, but be helping them to just do things a little bit more, from push-ups to running to just being engaged, can help them to be a little bit better physically and in their mental health.
All right, let's talk about minimalism, the idea that less can truly be more. Some psychologists say downsized living can increase happiness and well-being, improve our relationships. So first, what exactly makes someone a minimalist? And for people who aren't really interested in fully committing to that lifestyle, are there smaller, minimal things you can do to experience the benefits?
I love how you put smaller, minimal things there. For lots of people, it's recognizing that sometimes we can have a lot of things, a lot of stuff, sometimes to keep up with our neighbors or the Joneses or the Kardashians or whoever it is. And that sometimes that can just be overwhelming. Sometimes it can increase clutter and impact our mental well-being. And so for those who practice being a minimalist, they are maybe thrifters or maybe willing to get rid of those things, and they have more autonomy, competence, mental space, awareness, and even feeling more positive. And so these are some of the benefits that can happen by just getting rid of some things and being okay with less, and it can clear your mind even more.
Very cool. All right, let's talk about this Taylor Swift lyric. This is from her new album, of course, The Tortured Poets Department, on a song called I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. She says, I cry a lot, but I am so productive. It's an art. It's resonating with a lot of women who are working online. Tell us, how can we get things done, but also try to care for our mental health in the process?
Yes, Savannah, this should be my homework every time to listen to Taylor Swift or some amazing artist and to be able to comment on it. And, what this song does is talks about the duality that so many women experience, that I have to show up at home, at work, in the community, and I have to do so much. But sometimes I'm not cared for, or people don't see that I'm dealing with a lot. And that there's lots of studies that women are doing so much more now at home and at work, but also not having enough time to take care of themselves or having others that are looking care for them. And I think this song by Taylor Swift highlights that so many women are doing this. So kudos to Taylor for doing that. And maybe we all can take something out of this song to say that we need to pay attention to women, and women can do more for themselves and their mental health.
Savannah sang that song so Dr. James didn't have to.
There you go. Doctor, and then I apologize to everyone listening. Dr. George James, thank you so much. Always good to see you.
Thank you.
Coming up, she turned little words into a big movement with a jewelry line aimed at spreading positivity.
Up next on our latest edition of Women Mean Business, I'll sit down with the founder of Little Words Project about how she turned her wearable affirmations into a multi-billion-dollar company. Stay with us. You're watching Morning News Now.
Back now with some money news, starting with a big leadership shakeup over at Paramount Global. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and other news that affects your wallet. Good morning, Silvana.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. The CEO of Paramount Global is stepping down. Bob Bakish's departure comes as the company is inching forward in merger talks with Skydance Media. Bakish has led Paramount since the end of 2019 and was CEO of Viacom before its merger with CBS. He will be replaced for now by a trio of executives. His relationship with Sherry Redstone, that's Paramount's controlling shareholder, had reportedly become contentious in recent months. The FCC is fining AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon nearly $200 million for allegedly sharing customers' location data illegally with other companies without their consent. The FCC found the mobile provider sold the data to aggregators who resold it to third-party service providers. AT&T and Verizon say they plan to appeal the fines. And Netflix is taking a ride in the Mystery Machine. The Hollywood Reporter says the streaming giant is close to a deal for a live-action series based on Scooby-Doo. The project has a so-called script-to-series commitment, meaning if the script is well-received, it will go straight into production. It would be produced by Greg Berlanti, who is behind the Netflix hits You and the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Joe.
Ruh-roh.
Ooh, that was
my
very
Scooby-Doo
good.
impression. All right. Thanks, Savannah.
Very good.
Appreciate it.
good. Thank you so much. Now to the latest edition of our series, Women Mean Business. Adriana Carrig is the founder of Little Words Project, a jewelry company with major star power. The signature bracelet started as a way for Carrig to express herself, and now the brand has grown into a multi-million-dollar company that aims to spread positivity. Here's her story. Little Words Project began with a simple mission: to spread a little kindness in the world. Founder Adriana Carrig made the bracelets as an outlet after dealing with years of bullying. She felt if a young woman could just look down at her wrist and read a positive word, she might feel stronger. In college, she gifted them to her sorority sisters to inspire and remind them of their worth. Those positive affirmations helped lay the foundation for the successful multi-million-dollar jewelry company, which has 14 storefronts across the U.S. and partnerships with major retailers like Nordstrom, Target, and Urban Outfitters. Little Words Project's Nice Nation now reaching celebrity status, with the likes of Lance Bass, Alicia Keys, and perhaps most famously Taylor Swift spotted sporting a stack of the super popular bracelets. Paying kindness forward one bracelet at a time. Adriana Carrig is a woman who means business. And she is here with us this morning, founder of Little Words Project, of course. Adriana, thank you so much for being here. Good morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I love these bracelets. I'm so excited, and so excited to get to talk to you about them. So first, let's just rewind. I was in a sorority, and you just giving these to your sorority sisters. Tell me when this first started for you. Were you like making these in a dorm room? Like, what was this like in the beginning?
Pretty much exactly. That was it. Yeah, I started this back in college, a version of it, I should say. At the time, they were called Warm Fuzzies, which luckily we have moved away from that title. But they were all about spreading that kindness and positivity. I had grown up dealing with a lifetime of bullying, and I really wanted to create something that brought kindness to the world. And what better place to do that than in a college sorority? And it really did. It brought sisterhood to this group of women, and it made me feel like this was something that could be brought to the masses eventually.
And what type of message did you want to send on them? Because they don't just say, you know, anything. It's not like just your best friend's name or something like that. They say really specific things.
Yeah, well, listen, it could be your best friend's name. It could be your children's name. It could be something custom to you that when you look down, the idea is it's meant to get you through difficulty. So whatever that means to you, we want to be able to provide you that product, that vehicle to do that. But yeah, messages of strength and love and courage and hope, all of these things make such a huge difference when you look down and see that positive affirmation right on your wrist.
So I love that it was something that you were just doing naturally, almost like a craft initially, right?
Yeah.
That you're doing, you're passing out to friends.
Yep.
When and how were you like, okay, I'm going to turn this into an actual business?
Yeah. So I had done a version of it, like I said, in college. It was that crafty experience that we all are used to and know all about, especially with the rise of the friendship bracelet.
Oh, yeah.
But this is not your average friendship bracelet, right? So once I realized that there was something to the traceability of it. So the idea about Little Words is that you're supposed to wear your word for as long as you need it, and then one day take it off your wrist and pass it on to someone who needs it more. And the best part is that each one comes with a code on the back of the tag that is unique to your bracelet. So it's every bracelet is a one of one in that respect. You take that code, you connect it to our website, and then when you do pass it along, you can actually track and see where it goes. So that, once I literally had like one of those aha out of bed moments in the middle of the night where I thought of that idea, and that's when I knew that this could be something that had staying power.
And what was it like getting it off the ground?
Hard. It was really hard. It's still hard. It's probably the hardest job I've ever had. And you know, it's been a lot of intentional, grinding, hard work to just, you know, put one foot in front of the next, especially when you're creating something that's not like this revolutionary product or concept, right? At the end of the day, it is this friendship bracelet, which is extremely ubiquitous, right? But we have made it different. We've made it special, and we've brought it to market, you know, 11 years ago. So it's been a long time that this product has been in the works.
Okay, so now, though, like you're saying, I mean, friendship bracelets have had a moment.
Yes.
A certain Taylor Swift.
A certain Taylor Swift moment.
Definitely brought that to the forefront.
Yep.
What has that moment been like for you, having been in this business already? And what was it like to see when you see it on someone like Taylor Swift?
It's amazing. And I will say, of all the people, you know, to be brand adjacent to, Taylor Swift is not someone I am upset about, right? Especially, I mean, all of our wonderful celebrity fans have really just taken it to the next level for us. And it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to see the brand resonate so much with people who have been through so much in their own lives, right? And want to promote this concept of paying forward positivity. It's a special thing, and I'm very grateful.
And your fans, I love this, Nice Nation.
Yes, we call ourselves Nice Nation. Yeah, I mean, the original concept was about creating community and building that community that I always sought as a young woman who was bullied, and making sure that people understood that you can get, you can go further if you're kind. And ultimately, that's what we really wanted to make sure. That was the message we wanted to send across. And so Nice Nation is the name of that community. We've got a Facebook group, and all you got to do to be a part of it is connect your bracelet.
There you go.
So we make it really easy to get in and sit at the table with us, if you will.
We only have a few seconds left here, but we love to ask people in this segment for advice that they would give maybe to a young woman who's watching, especially if it's like this, where it's something, a passion of yours, and you want to turn it into a business.
Yeah, I mean, I started my business as a side hustle. I was working a full-time job at the time, and so if I had stopped to think about all of the things that could go wrong if I took this leap, I probably wouldn't have taken the leap. So my answer is always, make like Nike and just do it. Just do it. Don't stop yourself. You can make every reason in the book to not do something. But if you believe in yourself and you trust that anything is possible when you trust yourself, then yeah, anything really is possible.
There
so
you go.
Go
I love
for
it. Nice Nation. Adriana, thank you so much. Great to have you with us
me.
on Women We Miss This. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah, Nice Nation. We need more of that. Thank you so much. All right, coming up, not your average Amazon return. How a curious cat from California ended up on an unexpected adventure hundreds of miles from home. Her family did to get her back. Don't pause your devices. This is Morning News Now.
Okay, we love a good animal story around here, and we've got the unexpected journey of a beloved pet and the Amazon return that one couple will never forget.
NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander has more on her perfect ending.
If every cat has 9 lives, little Galena surely relied on every single one.
She loves to play in boxes.
But nearly 3 weeks ago, Galena found herself in a rather hairy situation when she decided to take refuge here, the very box her parents, Utah couple Matt and Carrie Clark, were using to return a few items to Amazon. They taped the box shut and took it back, all before realizing Galena was nowhere to be found.
She just mysteriously disappeared. So we put tons of flyers up. We contacted friends and family to help us search.
Turns out Galena's great adventure took her much farther from home. Tucked in her box, she made the more than 600-mile journey from Salt Lake City, Utah to Riverside, California, where she then spent 6 days in an Amazon packaging facility, unbeknownst to anyone. No food, no water. All the makings of a catastrophic shipping blunder, if not for Amazon employee Brandy Hunter, a self-proclaimed cat lady. She tracked down the Clarks, thanks to Galena's microchip, then treated her new feline friend to a little TLC and a trip to the vet, where she was reunited with a very relieved pair of cat parents. Call it the perfect ending for a very curious cat. Blaine Alexander, NBC News.
So I've owned cats, and if I ever put one in a box, I would know it. Instantly. There would be no doubt.
Right.
A cat was in the box.
I am shocked. It must be
a good sleeper, that one.
Yeah, chill cat. Exactly.
All right. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for starting your Tuesday with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, stunning scenes at Columbia University where pro-Palestinian demonstrators have stormed and occupied a building. We're on the ground with the very latest as the chaos on university campuses nationwide reaches new heights. Tragedy strikes North Carolina. Officials say 4 law enforcement officers are dead. 4 others have been shot. Heavy gunfire broke out while the officers were serving a warrant in Charlotte. The unanswered questions this morning over what went wrong. We'll also have more on the officers killed in the line of duty in one of the deadliest attacks on law enforcement in recent years. We're tracking those severe storms barreling east this morning. Millions across the South and Midwest still in the path of some wild and dangerous weather. Our Angie Lastman is watching it all as we get a jaw-dropping new look at one tornado's trail of destruction in Nebraska. Plus, a swing and a miss later in the hour, the major changes that could be coming to the MLB's controversial new uniforms after months of big league backlash from fans and players. We've been talking about it for several weeks now, and more to come in that chapter. We're going to begin with the nationwide campus demonstrations against the war in Gaza. Students now in at least 13 states across more than 17 campuses have been arrested as police continue to clash with protesters.
This morning, administrators at Columbia University are urging students to avoid campus after a group of protesters took over an academic building overnight. NBC News correspondent George Solis has the details.
Tensions here at Columbia reaching a fever pitch. Columbia public safety officials issuing an advisory to students and faculty, letting them know that access to campus today will be mostly restricted. It comes as that 2 p.m. deadline for that voluntary disbursement of the encampment here on campus came and went. Students saying they will not be leaving. All this as those campus clashes with police continue nationwide.
Overnight, campus protests escalating. Demonstrators occupying a building at Columbia University, smashing windows, barring the doors, and unfurling banners, including one reading Intifada. After protesters circled the campus earlier in the night, the unrest coming just hours after the university started suspending students who refused to leave an encampment after a deadline had passed.
These repulsive scare tactics mean nothing compared to the deaths of over 34,000 Palestinians.
Some faculty also on site, linking arms in front of the demonstrators. A growing number of universities are cracking down on pro-Palestinian protests spreading across college campuses. Overnight, at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, clashes between police and protesters on campus leading to arrests. And at UCLA in the early hours of the morning, authorities in tactical gear moving in during confrontations between dueling demonstrators. Earlier in the day, the students storming through a building and waving the Palestinian flag. Some Jewish students frustrated.
I have wholeheartedly always supported the right to freedom of protest and the freedom of speech, but when that starts to impede upon our right to education, be able to freely walk on campus, that's where I have an issue.
State troopers also in riot gear at the University of Texas Austin, detaining demonstrators, even carrying this person out by their hands. And at one point, students surrounding police who say they use pepper spray to disperse the crowd. The university says it believes a majority of the protesters are not affiliated with the school. And as the protests continue to spread, the University of Florida taking a firm stance this morning. In a statement following arrests, the school saying the University of Florida is not a daycare and we do not treat protesters like children. They knew the rules, they broke the rules, and they'll face the consequences. As schools across the country struggle to deal with protests overtaking campuses.
Back here at Columbia, the university also letting faculty and students know that access to other buildings on campus here may be restricted. And while negotiations here between organizers and the university may have failed for now, over at Northwestern in Illinois, their organizers and officials saying they've come to some agreement, all meant to limit the scope of these protests, including funding for Palestinian students and faculty, as well as more information and additional transparency over specific investments. Back to you.
All right, George, thank you so much.
Now, Congress could be cracking down on campus protests by taking a closer look at allegations of anti-Semitism among students and faculty.
House Speaker Mike Johnson is expected to announce a widespread probe into the safety of students on campus and what universities are doing to stop the spread of anti-Jewish hate.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now with more on this. Ali, good morning. So I guess some people might be wondering, what actually can Congress do about this? So what more do we know about this investigation into anti-Semitism on campus? And do we know who's going to be at the center of these probes?
Well, we know that universities who have been already up on Capitol Hill since the end of last year are likely to be the centers of the probe, though what we've watched so far is just the Speaker, Mike Johnson, say that he's going to be expanding an already existing House probe from the House Education Committee. That's been going on since the end of last year. And the reason I say that the universities who have already been up on Capitol Hill, I'm talking about University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, even just in the last few weeks, the president of Columbia University herself, all of them have sat before the Education Committee, intense hearings. Some of those hearings at the end of the year even led to the resignations and firings of some of those university presidents after controversial testimony that they gave. That all sparked an inquiry from the House Education Committee. Now that inquiry is going to be backed by Speaker Johnson and encompass the full House, meaning that they'll have more depth and breadth to do their investigating, to request files and other documents from these universities. But again, that's already been happening from this one House committee.
So Johnson also, of course, visited the Columbia University campus last week. We were just playing some of that video. Remind us of his response to these latest protests. What did he say about the students demonstrating, and does it give us any insight into us seeing this announcement now?
Well, it gives us insight, Savannah, into the ways that House Republicans are willing to make this one of their central issues in an election year. Most of the business, and I say most because there's a few key items that Congress still has to accomplish this year, but most of their legislative business is actually dispensed with, which allows the House Republican majority to once again focus on things that could be expedient to them in the upcoming 2024 election. We certainly know that Gaza and calls for a ceasefire are something of a problem for President Biden and Democrats. It's something I hear a lot about from operatives. Republicans could be both seeking to capitalize on it while also then adhering to their foreign policy and pro-Israel roots by expanding this probe and even potentially trying to get federal funding to some of these universities halted. There's a lot of rules governing that. We're not sure in what legislative form that would take, but that's certainly one of the ideas that we've heard from the Speaker in the ensuing days after he went to Columbia's campus and in the face of boos effectively said, go back to class to the people who were protesting.
Allie, the House is also expected to vote on the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act this week. What exactly is that? How is it addressing some of what we're seeing in the protests?
So again, this is legislation that is in response to not just the ongoing situation in Israel, but the situation that we're now seeing across the country as we watch these university protests continue to expand. What this is also meant to be, though, Joe, is legislation that not just spotlights anti-Semitism and curbing it, the House effectively saying we want to continue calling this out, but at the same time, it puts some Democratic members who have taken a pro-Gaza stance in a really difficult political position, especially again, the concerns that I've heard from Democratic operatives as we head closer to November, but then also the ways that this can be allowed in campaign ads going forward, even in House seats. Because remember, guys, we talk all the time about how this is a House with very tight margins. Only one or two defections on the Republican side effectively make it an even House. That's why every single House seat matters. And it's why votes like this can become problematic for embattled Democratic members whose districts may not like what they're seeing in these college campuses. And they definitely want their Congress people to take more pro-Israel stances.
All right, Allie Vitale, thank you so much.
Well, this morning, Hamas is considering the latest proposal on the table for a ceasefire deal in Gaza as Secretary Blinken pushes for a truce while touring the Middle East. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his troops will enter the southern city of Rafah with or without a hostage deal. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us from Tel Aviv with the latest. Hi, Raf, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. There is a real sense of urgency right now about getting a ceasefire deal over the line, a feeling that this may be the last chance for an agreement. And that is why this morning we are seeing a major diplomatic push from the Biden administration.
This morning, U.S. leaders racing against time. Secretary Blinken just arriving in Jordan, while overnight President Biden calling the rulers of both Egypt and Qatar. The goal, a deal to free the hostages after more than 200 days in captivity and to stop the fighting before Israel launches its ground offensive in Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinian civilians are sheltering and airstrikes are already raining down. The current proposal would see Hamas free 33 hostages, Israeli and Arab officials tell NBC News. In exchange, Israel would agree to a 40-day ceasefire and the release of potentially thousands of Palestinian prisoners.
In this moment, the only thing standing between the people of Gaza and a ceasefire is Hamas. They have to decide, and they have to decide quickly.
Hamas leaders say they're studying the proposal, while in Tel Aviv, protesters demanding Israel's government make a deal. The intensified protests sparked by this hostage video showing 46-year-old Omri Miran and 64-year-old American Keith Siegel. Keith's wife, Aviva, who was herself held captive for 51 days, tells us she can't bring herself to watch it.
It just takes me to those moments with Hamas, that they threatened us.
You and Keith were in Gaza together, and then you came out, he stayed behind. What was the last thing you said to each other in Gaza?
That he must be strong for me, and I'll be strong for him. And we hugged, and then I left him. And it's very difficult for me to think about Keith there alone without me.
Hopes a deal could end the agony for this family and so many others.
And so many families in both Israel and Gaza hoping for a deal. Now, the U.S. says the offer to Hamas on the table right now is, quote, incredibly generous. Hamas negotiators were in Cairo yesterday studying it. But this morning, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is taking a hard line. He says Israel will move ahead with an attack on Rafah with or without a hostage deal. Savannah.
All right, Raf Sanchez, thank you so much.
Cleanup efforts are continuing this morning after weekend storms. Tornadoes ravaged the nation's midsection, leaving many people to pick up the pieces. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch joins us now from Sulphur, Oklahoma, with the latest on the storms. Jesse, good morning.
Joe, good morning. We're getting yet another look at the devastation here in this small city. Take a look at what's left of this truck. The windshield bashed in here and across the sidewalk, which is littered with bricks and shards of glass. We've got what's left of this building. Piles of wood, of wire, of mangled metal, and again, more piles of bricks. All of this as we're also getting a new look at one of the storms as it unfolded.
Should we get away from the windows?
This morning, a jaw-dropping look at the raw power of a tornado captured from the engine of a freight train in Nebraska over the weekend. The conductor and engineer ducking for cover as a twister tore in front of their locomotive. It was just one of more than 130 tornadoes reported in recent days across multiple states, including a devastating EF4 twister that touched down in Oklahoma. And this morning, we're learning more about one of the victims from elsewhere in the state.
We lost a hometown girl on Saturday night.
In hard-hit Sulphur, Oklahoma, the fire chief says he knew the person who died here.
Went to school with her, and very, very big part of this community. She's just a blessing to everybody, and we're going to miss her.
Others narrowly escaping the destructive storm. Shay Patrick says her cousin was trapped with her 2-year-old son in this home, but eventually made it to safety.
This is my whole life, and it's just gone, and it happened just like that.
In the city's nearby downtown, some business owners picking up what's left of their livelihoods.
That door is supposed to come out, not in. It's a steel door.
A steel door.
With uprooted trees, shattered glass, and mangled buildings still dotting the landscape, Sulphur's cleanup continues.
They will rebuild even stronger. They'll be even stronger than they were before.
And back here in Sulphur, Oklahoma, there's marginal risk for more severe weather, potentially as early as late this afternoon, and all of that coming potentially, Joe, as we still got a lot of cleanup ahead for the people here. Back to you.
All right, Jesse, thank you.
And the threat for severe weather continues. Let's get a check on your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman's tracking some of that trouble this morning. Angie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. We started off our work week with much quieter conditions compared to what the weekend brought us, but now we're transitioning back into that potential for some severe weather. We've got some rain that we're going to deal with across the Great Lakes and parts of the Tennessee Valley and moving east over the next couple of hours, but the severe potential is really going to be focused once again across the center of the country. We'll show you that here in a moment. There's that quick moving system that's going to bring a little bit of rain to folks folks in this region. We'll see interior Northeast, see the potential for some isolated flash flooding, so a heads up for folks there through the day today. Meanwhile, there's that system that we're going to be watching here through the day today. This is what we're going to see spark up some of these stronger storms later into the afternoon and evening hours, specifically from Minnesota stretching down to Texas and into Oklahoma. You can see Kansas City, Des Moines, right in the enhanced risk for this activity here as we get into the afternoon hours. All hazards on the table, but we're specifically worried about the large hail, 2 inches or larger, plus those straight line winds. And on top of that, we can't rule out some of these isolated tornadoes. Again, it stretches as far north as Minnesota and as far south as Oklahoma as far as the risk for that larger hail. But we'll see that big area included in all of that here as we get into the afternoon hours to see the potential for some of those stronger storms. Looking ahead to tomorrow, we see another system that develops over the Rockies. This same kind of pattern persists for us, and it sparks up, you guessed it, those afternoon thunderstorms that will likely present us with the chance for some strong to severe storms across the same region that we've been dealing with this for the extended period. So enhanced risk is to be centered for Dodge City, Wichita, Concordia. But as far south as Midland, you'll see that slight risk for some of these stronger storms. And this is going to be something places like Kansas City, Dallas, Amarillo, you'll still have the chance to see some of those severe thunderstorms. But the risk will be mainly the large hail. We'll see those strong winds, 70, 75 miles per hour or larger, or higher rather. And of course, those strong tornadoes, can't rule those out. On top of that, the rain chances will be pretty good. We'll see those hourly rainfall rates anywhere from 1 inch to 2 inches. And that's quite an expansive area from Austin to Omaha, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and Dallas all included in that. So we will watch for the flash flooding risk as we gear up for anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inches of rain for a more widespread area. But we could see isolated amounts up to 5 inches. So we'll be watching for that. And how about those temperatures? Along the East Coast, we've been dealing with really warm conditions. Yesterday, for a lot of folks, we saw record-breaking highs. We're still going to see the 80s hugging the coast, but we'll start to see some cooler air working behind that first front that I showed you that's bringing a little bit of that rain to folks across the Northeast. Here's the deal as far as temperatures go today. We'll end up into the upper 80s. Charleston heads to the mid-70s. You can see those 40s, 50s, and 60s. We'll end up with some cooler air coming in off the Atlantic as we get into the interior portions of the Northeast. So that'll be something to keep a close eye on. 50 degrees for Boston today. A bit of a different story than what we dealt with across that region yesterday. 66 degrees in New York, so not quite as warm either there for folks. Hartford will end up into the low 60s. So some cooler conditions, a little closer to normal in some spots. But boy, what a big drop we saw. It'll be 21 degrees cooler than what we saw in New York yesterday. So wow, big difference. Hope you guys brought a jacket for the early morning hours. We've got upper 70s on tap tomorrow for Indianapolis, mid 80s. Stick with us for folks across Paducah, Louisville, Springfield. You'll head to the low 80s. Chicago ends up into the upper 70s. So some of these temperatures still starting off warmer than normal for May, but we've got kind of a mixed bag with cooler air filtering in along the East Coast.
Little tease yesterday.
Just a little.
Oh,
I made the
nice.
most of it. I was tanning in Central Park.
You mentioned the change.
I do not doubt that.
Last night we ate outdoors. We're like,
Yeah, drop.
It's cold.
Yeah. Angie, why didn't you rain for a minute there? Yeah.
Thank you, Angie.
Of course.
Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. We're going to take you to Lower Manhattan with what we're expecting to hear from Michael Cohen's former banker when former President Trump's hush money trial resumes today.
But first, it's being called the deadliest attack on law enforcement in recent memory. What we know this morning about that violent shootout in Charlotte, North Carolina that left 4 officers dead. Stay with us. That's next.
This morning, officials in Charlotte are searching for answers after one of the deadliest attacks on law enforcement in recent years. A fugitive task force was attempting to serve a warrant, taking heavy gunfire, killing 3 members of the task force and a responding officer. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is in Charlotte with the latest.
Here in this quiet residential neighborhood of Charlotte, the police chief says this is a vivid reminder that when members of the law enforcement community put on their uniform, there is no guarantee they'll be returning at the end of the day. The fugitive task force consists of multiple agencies. Of those members, 8 were shot, 4 were killed, trying to just serve an arrest warrant and retrieve a weapon from someone who should have never had one in the first place.
In Charlotte this morning, a deep sense of loss following one of the worst attacks on law enforcement in recent memory.
And of course, we got shots fired.
A shootout taking the lives of 4 law enforcement officers and leaving 4 others wounded. Overnight, Charlotte Mecklenburg's police chief announcing one of his own officers, Joshua Iyer, died as a result of that attack, leaving behind a wife and 3-year-old son.
We'll always be indebted to Officer Iyer for his bravery and his sacrifice for this profession.
Police say the shooting erupted outside of this home, captured in chilling detail on a live stream. Members of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force attempting to serve a warrant on a convicted felon wanted for firearms possession quickly found themselves taking on heavy gunfire.
Officers returned gunfire and struck the victim, who was later pronounced deceased in the front yard of the residence.
The chief says a second person then fired on the officers from inside the home.
Target down. Additional shot from inside the house.
Video taken by a neighbor shows law enforcement, including SWAT teams, descending on the scene as residents looked on in shock.
I heard like gunshots, and then that's when the police were telling everybody to like stay in their house.
After a 3-hour standoff, police cleared the home, finding a woman and a 17-year-old inside.
They were both brought to the police station as persons of interest.
Authorities say the other victims include a deputy with the U.S. Marshals and 2 members of the state's Department of Correction, identified overnight as Sam Peloche and Alden Elliott, both 14-year veterans of the department.
We lost some heroes that are out to just simply trying to keep our community safe.
Charlotte's mayor fighting back tears.
And the most that I can ask of our community is that we honor and respect them.
As far as what we know about the suspect, police just said he had a high-powered rifle. They didn't specify what kind or how he obtained it. Overnight, President Biden issuing a statement saying that for family members who received this phone call, losing someone in law enforcement, it's like taking a piece of their soul away. He says that we have to do more to protect the law enforcement community. In Charlotte, Sam Brock, NBC News. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Sam. Well, NBC News analyst Jim Kavanaugh joins us now. He's a retired special agent in charge for the ATF. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. So what are some of the key details law enforcement may be looking to find out after a tragic event like this?
Well, they're going to analyze the whole situation, obviously, to see how it unfolded. And you're going to have a possible criminal case, Savannah, against persons inside the house who were shooting and probably responsible for the multiple murder of officers. The way it really unfolded was they went to make an arrest of the subject for felon in possession and fleeing, eluding the police. And he was killed in the front lawn of the home while shooting at the officers, and they returned fire. When they then approached him, after he was down, they took rifle fire from inside the house. So that was pretty deadly. And then responding officers, that one Charlotte Mecklenburg officer, uniformed officer who was killed, he was a responding officer to that shooting. So the person inside the house, you know, was shooting at responding officers, which he shot 4 other officers. So we had 4 dead and 4 wounded. Just a real sad day for the Fugitive Task Force and all law enforcement across the country.
Jim, what can you tell us about the U.S. Marshal Service Fugitive Task Force? I mean, what type of work do they do? It's pretty dangerous, right?
Yeah, you know, I had many agents on all these task forces, the Marshals Fugitive Task Force, and we work with them extensively. They're super. It's a super operation. The U.S. Marshal Service is, you know, the unsung heroes, really, of law enforcement. They do so much dangerous work, chasing down escaped federal prisoners, federal fugitives. But they formed these Fugitive Task Force a number of years ago and brought all the law enforcement together to do just that job, to chase down fugitives and wanted people. And who's on it is the federal agencies and the state agencies and the local agencies in an area. So here you have the corrections officers from North Carolina, you have Charlotte Mecklenburg officers, you have other federal agents on the task force, and, you know, as many as 70 agencies participating in this one fugitive task force. So they can go out across their area, which here it's the Carolinas, and pick up various fugitives and, you know, have the time to track them down and find them, which keeps us all so much safer. It's a great unit, really, great unit.
So, Jim, serving warrants, we know that can be dangerous. How does law enforcement train for that situation, especially when it's taking place in a residential area as it was here?
Yeah, great question, Savannah. You know, I was always of the mindset, and being a negotiator and the way I did things as a uniformed officer, I always wanted to do things easy. So I always wanted to catch them away from their house, you know, while they were buying beer at the market, you know, because then, you know, maybe they could hit you with a 12-pack of beer, or they might have a handgun, but they weren't carrying a machine gun or a rifle, which we, you know, might suspect they're involved in, especially in ATF. We were all after armed people and people with bombs and guns. So, you know, we tried to manipulate how we would arrest them, where we would pick them up to try to be safe. But there's no real safe place ever, because they can always pull out a gun and shoot if they want to. And it looks like the Fugitive Task Force won the gun battle initially. And it was the second shooter or shooters who wreaked the carnage on them when they approached the initial suspect.
All right, Jim Kavanaugh, as always, we so appreciate your analysis here.
International news now. New this morning, a man with a sword was arrested after attacking several people in London.
NBC's Claudio Lavanga has details on that and other world headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Well, that's right. Early this morning, a man drove a car into a house in East London. Then he got out and he attacked several members of the public, including 2 officers, with a sword. Now, Metropolitan Police in London said several people have been stabbed, but didn't specify how many and what their medical conditions are, even though now they say that at least one of the victims, a 13-year-old boy, has been killed. Now, the police confirmed that a 36-year-old man was arrested at the scene and is now in custody. The motive of the attack is still unclear, and the police said they will provide more information as soon as they can. Let's go to Southeast Asia now, where a weeks-long heat wave and record-high temperatures led to urgent health warnings throughout the region. On Monday, in the Philippines, all public schools were closed and millions of students across the country were told to stay home. Authorities in Cambodia warned that temperatures could reach 109 degrees this week there, the highest temperature in 170 years. And Myanmar also warned of record-high temperatures after several towns in the country last week were on the list of the hottest spots worldwide. And let's end this tour of the world in Britain, where a mysterious Roman artifact is going on public display for the first time. The object is one of only 33 similar items found in Britain and was discovered during an amateur dig in the summer of 2023. Experts believe that these 12-sided objects were possibly linked to Roman rituals or religion, but there are no reference to them in ancient books. Well, if you ask me, that looks like an early ancient version of Rubik's Cube.
That's pretty cool.
I might actually be able to finish that one. All right. Thank you, Claudia.
Thanks. Much more to come. Oh, you got him. Much more to come here on Morning News Now, including a brewing legal showdown between Hunter Biden and Fox News.
But first, what we can expect to hear later this morning in court when a banker who worked with former President Trump's attorney Michael Cohen takes the witness stand in the former president's hush money trial. We'll take you outside that Manhattan courtroom next. After an off day on Monday, testimony is set to resume today in the hush money criminal trial of former President Donald Trump here in New York.
Attorney Michael Cohen's former banker, Gary Farrow, is expected to be first on the stand. Prosecutors are aiming to use Farrow's testimony to confirm documents related to alleged hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels.
For more, we're joined by NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who's outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Vaughn, good morning. So it's been a few days since court has been in session. Bring us up to speed on the big takeaways from the first week of testimony.
Right. Last week was the first big week of testimony from number one witness, David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, who began to tell the story of the alleged hush money payment scheme, the catch and kill effort to buy up the stories of the likes of Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, who alleged sexual relations with Donald Trump in the past, all ahead of his 2016 campaign. But then on Friday, we saw 2 additional witnesses, one who was the former executive assistant to the Trump Organization for Donald Trump, who was the one who provided the evidence that she, for Donald Trump, had contact information for Karen McDougal as well as Stormy Daniels, and had testified that she had believed that she had even seen Stormy Daniels at Trump Tower once. But then you also had Gary Farrow, that former First Republic banker who worked with Michael Cohen to set up multiple bank accounts and was at the heart of, in October 2016, the effort to transfer $130,000 to an attorney representing Stormy Daniels. As you said, Gary Farrow, that former banker, is expected to take the stand again here this morning.
And what piece of this puzzle is he for the prosecution? What are they hoping to use Gary Farrow to show?
Right. He's one of those witnesses that is not alleged to have engaged in any wrongdoing himself, but he is somebody who is able to authenticate not only those accounts, but also his own emails that he had exchanged with other members of his banking team about Michael Cohen. For instance, there was one email that he had sent in October 2016 as those discussions were going about how best to pay Stormy Daniels, in which he emailed one of his team members saying that he had just received a phone call from Michael Cohen and that he needed checks to be set up without an address on them, and he needed this to be done ASAP. It just shows the urgency that he was working under on behalf of his client, Michael Cohen. Again, it's not clear, even at this point in time, whether he was aware of exactly what that money himself was going to be used for, but it showed the quickness and swiftness of which he was moving to support Michael Cohen, allegedly on behalf of Donald Trump.
So the former presidents, former attorneys, former banker. Got it. All right. Vaughn, this is an abbreviated week. We didn't have court yesterday. A reminder, tomorrow's Wednesday. We won't have court on Wednesday. So what can we expect in the courtroom this week? Do we have an idea of who might take the stand?
We don't know who the next witnesses are up. So we could potentially see Karen McDougal, who is the former Playboy model who alleged an affair with Donald Trump for about 10 months. We could see Hope Hicks, the former Trump aide. We could even potentially see Stormy Daniels herself. We don't expect Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former personal lawyer, who is the one who is in the middle of this, who is the one that paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' attorney in October 2016. We don't expect him until the end of this. So there's a litany of witnesses, and we could have people like the former banker, or, some are a former accountant, or even somebody who can explain the financing and how this works. So there's a plethora number of witnesses that could come forward here with not only today or either on Thursday or Friday, guys.
Yep, all the formers. All right, Vaughn, thank you so much.
Thanks, Vaughn. Now to a potential legal showdown between President Biden's son and Fox News.
Lawyers for Hunter Biden say they are planning to sue the network. According to a letter sent to Fox and obtained by NBC News, the lawsuit is set to be filed imminently.
For more, we are joined by NBC News senior investigative producer Sarah Fitzpatrick, who has covered Hunter Biden extensively. Sarah, good morning. You actually also obtained this letter. What exactly is being alleged here, and has Fox News responded?
Good morning. Yes, the letter is a stunning document. Hunter's lawyers are alleging that Fox News engaged in a conspiracy to defame Hunter Biden by painting him in a false light. A major focus of the letter is Fox News' extensive coverage of those bribery allegations related to Hunter and his father, Joe Biden, which we now know were based on information from an FBI informant that has been indicted for providing that false information to the FBI. The letter also alleges that Fox used Biden's image for commercial purposes, and also that they unlawfully published hacked, intimate images of him, an interesting application of copyright law. Fox just responded to our request for comment this morning. They say that their coverage is protected under the First Amendment, that Hunter Biden is a public figure, and they believe that their coverage has been accurate. Of course, that's going to be up for a judge to decide.
So, Sarah, this new threat of litigation comes about a year after Fox News agreed to pay almost $800 million to Dominion Voting Systems, settling defamation claims related to Fox's airing of election fraud claims in the 2020 election. Hunter Biden's legal team is saying that decision may have been partially inspired this lawsuit. Is that right?
Absolutely. The Dominion lawsuit is interesting because although it was such a huge judgment, it covered a relatively short period of time and a relatively small number of on-air claims. Hunter Biden, meanwhile, has been the subject of coverage for years and years. And there are, so many really extensive allegations that Fox has made, in a variety of different mediums. Media Matters, an independent group, has tracked how many mentions, and they found that there were over 13,000 mentions of Hunter Biden just since January 2023. But what we know is that the indictment of Alexander Smirnov earlier this year is what pushed the plan into action. Hunter's attorney told me that those revelations, quote, basically closed the loop on the conspiracy. Joe?
Do we have any idea when this lawsuit could be filed and what comes next here, Sarah?
So the Hunter team has been preparing for this for over a year, and they said in the letter that they anticipate litigation imminently. But we know that these cases, specifically defamation cases, are extremely difficult. They are complex, and there's a huge volume of information here that would need to go back and forth in discovery. And keep in mind, they haven't actually filed the suit yet. So I think we'll be following this for a very long time. Savannah.
All right, Sarah, great reporting. Thanks for joining us.
Coming up, it is an age-old question that has been on a lot of Americans' minds lately. Is it cheaper to rent or buy, especially in a big city like New York?
Oh, yeah. After the break, we'll dig into some pretty surprising new numbers that show you can actually save some cash by signing that lease. That is next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. We talk a lot about this here, screen time. It's a concern, of course, for millions of parents, whether that's teens scrolling on social media, kids playing video games, or even just young kids watching TV.
A new guide that's out this morning looks to help parents with that issue and giving advice on how to manage the amount of time their kids spent in front of screens at different ages.
Yeah, here with us now to share this important new guidance is Dr. Jenny Radesky. She's a pediatrician and co-director of the American Academy of Pediatrics Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health. Yep. What a title that is at a time like this. Exactly what we need. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Radesky. Good morning, and thank you for bringing us this new guide. So I know it kind of comes down to 5 C's, which I think is helpful for people to remember, but tell us the big takeaways here.
Yeah, so we knew that this is feeling really, really hard for parents right now, and they wanted some easy to remember guidance that goes beyond the just 2-hour rule of screen time.
Right,
that doesn't reflect updated evidence. So the 5 C's are child, content, calm, crowding out, and communication. These are all based on what both can help you set healthy digital habits with kids if you're just starting to introduce technology, or if you want to roll it back because you feel like things are overwhelming in your household. We have strategies in our handouts you can find on the aap.org website to really think about, how do I do this in a way that's not just going to lead to more arguments with my kids, and it's going to be sustained. It's not just going to be, all right, we try to reduce screens for one day and then it all comes rushing back in.
Of course, every age group is different. So let's walk through advice for different age groups. And let's start with infants, because you really have to kind of build a foundation here, right?
Totally. In infancy, kids can't learn from screens yet. So it's really about the parents setting their own boundaries around technology. When we as parents use tech, we talk to our kids less. We're less attached to them emotionally, right? So infancy, you're adjusting to parenthood. You should be thinking about, how do I carve out time to play and talk with my kids? That's the foundation of emotional health in kids, and really avoid just having them sit in front of YouTube or the TV.
Okay, let's move up to school-age kids. One, maybe they are learning, or maybe that's how a lot of times it's being explained on those tablets. What do you do then?
So preschool age, kids can learn from media, but it needs to be educational. It needs to be like PBS Kids or Sesame Street, stuff that's really designed to teach kids, not to make money off of kids through ad impressions, right? So keeping things educational. Another big thing you're doing when you're a young kid is learning how to calm down your big emotions. So we're telling families, avoid using screens for that calming purpose, because it leads to more difficulties over time.
I see that happen so often where parents just kind of put a screen in front of their kids.
It's so tempting. Parenting is hard, but we want families to have non-screen strategies to calm your brains and your body down. That's such an important life skill. Starts in infancy, goes through adulthood.
Let's move to teenagers, which can be the toughest thing. You're talking about kids getting smartphones. Of course, you're dealing with social media. What can you do to make sure your kids are safe, their mental health is as good as humanly possible?
Right. So here's our tips. Starting in school age, kids are starting to be more logical. They can talk to you about technology more, keep monitoring their content, and that it's not crowding out other activities. Once they're teens, it's normal for them to want to just connect with other kids, figure out their identity. They're going to want to do that through phones and through social media. Our tips are, keep lines of communication open so you can be really connecting with your kids and understanding their experience, not judging them, not being panicky. Number 2 is set some norms about boundaries. It doesn't need to come into the bedroom. You can put it down and take a break from it and just have time for your own solitude or dinner time conversation. We're encouraging kids to be honest about their age, not starting social media accounts when they're not supposed to under 13, because that is linked with more negative experiences in kids. And, getting a smartphone does not equal getting social media, right? So there should be ongoing conversations between parents and kids about, what are you ready for? what drama are other kids experiencing when they do get these phones, and helping them build some insight so they can be more savvy digital citizens.
Maybe even if the app say you can be 13, maybe a conversation in your own home about what that real right age is, especially based on friends and that kind of thing.
I think what kids are telling us through the Center of Excellence is we don't want to feel controlled. We don't want to just be talked down to and have our parents take our phones away and have rules. So that's really why we're framing this around talk to your kids, understand them. If you meet them where they are, you'll be much more likely to help them control their time on screens, get a good night's sleep, and be, have a more regulated relationship with it.
Dr. Jenny Radesky, thank you so much for sharing this with us and coming by to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
That was great.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get to some money news, starting with a headline that hits a little close to home. NBC bidding big time for NBA broadcast rights.
That's right. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning. Yep. So NBC Universal reportedly plans to offer $2.5 billion a year for a package of NBA games. The Wall Street Journal says TNT, which is owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, has paid an average of $1.2 billion under its current deal. But it failed to reach a new agreement with the league before an exclusive negotiating window expired last week. TNT and Warner began airing NBA games in 1984, while Disney's ESPN started broadcasting games in 2002. When NBC lost the rights, that was when NBC lost the rights. Now, Disney is expected to pay an average of $2.6 billion a year to renew its deal. Meanwhile, Peacock is raising prices ahead of the Summer Olympics. The streaming service owned by NBC Universal and Comcast will increase the monthly fee for new subscribers by $2 on July 18th. So that pushes the ad-supported tier to $7.99 a month and the ad-free tier to $13.99. Now, the annual plan goes up $20 to $79.99 for the ad-supported tier and $139.99 for no ads. The increase goes into effect for existing subscribers on August 17th. And Elon Musk has cut 2 senior Tesla executives and plans to lay off several hundred employees. The Information reports Musk is frustrated by falling sales. The 2 executives run Tesla's supercharger and new products units. Tesla's public policy team will also be dissolved. Earlier this month, the company announced the layoffs of more than 10% of the workforce, guys.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
All right, next up here, a new study suggests it's better to rent than to buy a home in all 50 of the largest metro areas in the U.S.
Yeah, according to the analysis from Bankrate, nationally, the typical home costs nearly 37% more to buy than to rent on a monthly basis.
Let's bring in NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Roman. So I think, first of all, I always thought, oh, gosh, you want to buy a home.
Exactly.
It's better than renting.
Exactly.
You got this 37%, which is a pretty big number. In some places, it's even more,
yeah,
right?
It's really incredible. So typical rent is about $1,900 a month. A typical monthly mortgage, $2,700. And it gets really ugly out west. When you look out west at San Francisco, for example, typical rent, $3,000. A mortgage, $8,500. Wow. San Jose, Austin, Seattle. I mean, those big cities out west, you have this very wide gap between what people would pay for a mortgage and what they're paying for rent. And so it does, in those places, it makes sense to say, you know what? I am just going to keep throwing my money at the landlord because I don't have the insurance rates, I don't have the mortgage rates, I don't have the upkeep, and I can start to build and pad my bottom line for when I do buy down the road.
Is there anywhere where it does make more sense to be buying?
So there are some towns where you have that gap between rent and mortgage is very narrow. One of them is Buffalo, New York, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philly, Cleveland. Those are the places I think it makes more sense to make sure you're getting yourself ready for homeownership and investing in a long-term purchase of a home. Remember, a lot of American wealth for the typical family comes from a real estate purchase. These are these big assets that get more valuable over time, that you're really investing in something. That's what makes it so frustrating that right now the economics are all messed up, and so it's not a great time to be a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, I mean, home ownership is the dream for millions of Americans.
Right.
It's not going to stay like this, right? We expect things to turn around. What can you do now to make sure you're ready?
Yeah, 4 out of 5 Americans say the American dream is buying a home. So what you need to do is start saving for that down payment. You know, the rule of thumb is you need 20% for a down payment. The more you have for a down payment, the less of the home you're financing with those high interest rates, right? But the typical, I think the average is like 14% is what the down payment is. Clean up your credit score. Go to annualcreditreport.com. Make sure there aren't any mistakes so you have a high credit score. The higher the credit score, the lower the mortgage rate. You can also hunt around for FHA, USDA, and Veterans Administration deals where if you qualify, those mortgage rates are much, much lower, and in some cases, you only need a little bit of a down payment. So there are programs meant to help people get into homeownership. But again, right now, just with so little inventory on the market, record high home prices, and the highest mortgage rates since 2000, the math just doesn't make sense. I usually say, don't just throw your money away. You should be buying. But actually, you're not throwing your money away. Just hold on.
Right. I love that. All right, Christine, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Welcome back. We've got some news on the Kelce brothers for you. So Travis Kelce just signed a contract extension for 2 more years with the Kansas City Chiefs, worth more than $17 million a year. That makes him the highest paid tight end in the league. Meanwhile, Travis's older brother, Jason Kelce, is heading from the football field to the broadcast world. The newly retired Eagles star, who's known for his fun personality, well, that's one way of putting it, will be joining ESPN's Monday Night Countdown pregame broadcast show. So lots more of both Jason and Travis. There you go, Joe.
Known for his fun personality.
Yeah, and his shirtless antics.
I think that's in his resume. All right.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.